Have you ever wondered why some people seem to fall into destructive patterns while others don't? What if I told you that what we call addiction might not be what we think it is at all? What if the substances, the behaviors, the compulsions we label as addictions are actually just symptoms of something much deeper? Thank you for clicking on this video today. You're here on Not What It Seems, where we bring you daily content that challenges conventional thinking and opens new perspectives on the human experience. Today, we're diving into a profound understanding that could completely change how you see addiction, pain, and healing. The statement, "You're not addicted, you're just in pain," might sound controversial, even dismissive to some. But this isn't about minimizing anyone's struggle. It's about understanding the root cause of what we've been calling addiction for decades. Think of it this way. When you have a fever, you don't treat the thermometer. The fever is telling you something important about what's happening inside your body. Similarly, addictive behaviors are often telling us something crucial about unresolved pain and trauma. Dr. Gabor Maté's revolutionary work has shown us that addiction is not a disease of choice or moral failing, but rather an adaptive response to pain. When we look at addiction through this lens, everything changes. The shame dissolves, the judgment softens, and suddenly we can see the person behind the behavior. We can see someone who has been trying to survive, trying to cope, trying to manage unbearable emotional or psychological pain. But what kind of pain are we talking about here? It's not always the dramatic, obvious trauma that comes to mind. Sometimes it's the quiet pain of never feeling truly seen or understood as a child. Sometimes it's the pain of chronic stress, of living in survival mode for so long that your nervous system forgets how to rest. Sometimes it's the pain of disconnection, of feeling fundamentally alone in the world despite being surrounded by people. Consider this question. Why do some people who experience trauma develop addictive patterns, while others don't? The answer lies in understanding that trauma isn't just what happens to us, it's what happens inside us as a result of what happens to us. It's the internal disruption, the disconnection from our authentic selves, the loss of that fundamental sense of safety and belonging that we all need to thrive. When a child experiences neglect, abuse, or even well-intentioned but emotionally unavailable parenting, something profound happens in their developing brain and nervous system. They learn that the world isn't safe, that their needs won't be met consistently, that they must find ways to self-soothe and self-regulate because the adults around them aren't able to provide that co-regulation they desperately need. This is where substances and addictive behaviors come in. They're not the problem, they're the solution to the problem. They're the brain's attempt to regulate itself, to find relief from overwhelming emotions, to create the chemical balance that should have been established through secure attachment and consistent caregiving. In other words, addiction is the brain's way of trying to heal itself with the tools it has available. Think about it like this. Imagine you're in a burning building and you find a rope hanging from a window. You grab onto that rope because it's your way out, your survival mechanism. You don't care if the rope is frayed or if it might not hold your weight forever. In that moment, it's saving your life. Addictive substances and behaviors serve the same function for someone in emotional pain. They provide immediate relief, a momentary escape from unbearable internal experiences. But here's what's truly profound about this understanding. When we recognize that addiction is actually an attempt at self-medication for unresolved pain, we can begin to approach healing in a completely different way. Instead of focusing solely on stopping the behavior, we can focus on addressing the underlying pain. Instead of asking, how do we get them to stop using, We can ask, what pain are they trying to escape from, and how can we help them heal that? This doesn't mean that addressing addictive behaviors isn't important. Of course it is. But when we understand that these behaviors serve a function, we can work with that understanding rather than against it. We can honor the fact that at some point, these behaviors were adaptive. They were helpful. They were survival mechanisms. And we can gently help people find new, healthier ways to meet those same needs. Now, you might be wondering, if addiction is really about pain, why don't we see it in everyone who experiences trauma? This is where individual differences come in. Some people have access to healthy coping mechanisms from an early age. Some have strong social support systems. Some have genetic factors that make them more or less susceptible to addictive substances. Some have access to therapy, to healing modalities, to communities that support their growth and recovery. But perhaps most importantly, some people have what we call protective factors in their environment. These might include having at least one caring adult in their life during childhood, access to creative expression, connection to nature, spiritual practices, or simply the luck of being born into circumstances that didn't overwhelm their developing nervous system's capacity to cope. If you're going through this situation and feel like you want to contribute to our content, please write in the comments about your experiences. I would love to read your comment and learn from your perspective. The beautiful thing about understanding addiction as a response to pain is that it opens up possibilities for healing that weren't there before. When we see someone struggling with addictive behaviors, we can look beyond the surface and ask ourselves, what would it be like to live in their internal world? What kind of pain might they be carrying? What unmet needs might their addiction be trying to fulfill? This perspective also helps us understand why traditional approaches to addiction treatment sometimes fall short. If we're only addressing the behavior without addressing the underlying pain, we're essentially asking someone to give up their coping mechanism without providing them with alternatives. It's like asking someone to put down their crutches before their broken leg has healed. Real healing happens when we create safe spaces for people to feel their pain, to process their trauma, to reconnect with their authentic selves. It happens when we help them develop healthy ways to regulate their nervous system, to soothe themselves when they're distressed, to connect with others in meaningful ways. It happens when we address not just the symptoms, but the root causes. But what does this look like in practical terms? It means creating environments where people feel safe to be vulnerable, to share their stories without judgment. It means understanding that healing is not a linear process, that there will be setbacks and challenges along the way. It means recognizing that recovery is not just about stopping a behavior, but about reclaiming one's life, one's relationships, one's sense of purpose and meaning. It also means understanding that trauma-informed care is not just for people with obvious trauma histories. We all carry wounds from our past, and we all deserve to be treated with compassion and understanding. When we approach each other from this place of recognition, everything changes. We stop seeing addicts and start seeing human beings who are in pain and trying to find their way to healing. One of the most powerful aspects of this understanding is how it transforms our relationship with shame. Shame is perhaps the most toxic emotion for someone struggling with addiction. It's the voice that says you're broken, you're weak, you're bad. But when we understand that addictive behaviors are actually attempts at self-healing, shame loses its power. Instead of shame, we can feel compassion. Instead of judgment, we can feel understanding. This doesn't mean we excuse harmful behaviors or ignore the very real consequences that addiction can have on individuals, families, and communities. What it means is that we can hold space for both the harm and the humanity. We can acknowledge that someone's actions may have caused pain, while also recognizing that their actions came from their own unhealed pain. The ripple effects of this understanding extend far beyond individual healing. When we start to see addiction as a symptom of unaddressed societal pain, we begin to ask different questions about prevention and treatment. We start to look at the conditions that create pain in the first place: poverty, racism, social isolation, childhood trauma, chronic stress. We start to understand that healing addiction requires healing communities. This perspective also challenges us to look at our own coping mechanisms. Most of us have ways of avoiding or numbing emotional pain that might not look like traditional addiction but serve similar functions. Maybe it's overworking. Maybe it's endless scrolling on social media. Maybe it's shopping or perfectionism or people-pleasing. When we can see these patterns in ourselves with compassion rather than judgment, we create space for genuine growth and healing. The journey from pain to healing is not about eliminating all discomfort from our lives. Pain is part of the human experience, and learning to be present with our pain, to feel it without being overwhelmed by it, is one of the most important skills we can develop. But there's a difference between clean pain and dirty pain. Clean pain is the natural response to loss, disappointment, or challenge. Dirty pain is what we add to clean pain through our stories, our shame, our resistance to what is. Addiction often develops as a way to avoid both clean and dirty pain, but in doing so, it actually creates more pain in the long run. The path to healing involves learning to be present with clean pain while releasing the dirty pain we've accumulated over the years. This requires tremendous courage and often requires support from others who understand the journey. When we understand that healing is possible, that pain can be transformed, that people can recover their authentic selves even after years of disconnection and struggle, hope becomes possible. Not the false hope that everything will be easy, but the real hope that comes from understanding that we are resilient, that we have the capacity to heal, that we are not broken beyond repair. The most profound gift of this understanding is that it returns dignity to people who have been stripped of it by stigma and shame. It says that your struggle makes sense, that your pain is valid, that your attempts to cope are understandable given what you've been through. It says that you are not your addiction. You are a human being who has been in pain and has been trying to find relief. As we wrap up this exploration today, I want you to remember that whether you're struggling with addiction yourself, loving someone who is, or simply trying to understand the human condition more deeply, this perspective offers a pathway to greater compassion and more effective healing. When we stop seeing addiction as a moral failing and start seeing it as an understandable response to pain, we open up possibilities for genuine transformation. The invitation is to look beyond the surface, to ask the deeper questions, to approach ourselves and others with curiosity rather than judgment. The invitation is to remember that we are all doing the best we can with the tools we have, and that healing happens in relationship, in community, in the safety of being truly seen and accepted. If this content resonated with you today, I'd be grateful if you'd give it a like. Your engagement helps us reach more people who might benefit from these perspectives. And if you feel moved to share your own experiences or thoughts in the comments below, please do. I read every comment and I'm always learning from your insights. If you're interested in more content that challenges conventional thinking and explores the deeper aspects of human experience, consider subscribing to Not What It Seems. Until next time, remember that your pain is valid, your healing is possible, and you are not alone on this journey.